Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this webinar, a collaboration between Nokia and Téral Research. This webinar will focus on the topic of neutral hosts and the role that they are continuing to play in the ongoing reshaping of the telecom landscape. My name is Michel Schbat, Head of Digital Infrastructure and Neutral Host segment in Nokia, and I'll be moderating this webinar. Last year, Nokia has commissioned Téral Research to issue a report that they have entitled the Global Neutral Host Index, a first-of-a-kind report aiming at sizing and analyzing the global business of neutral hosts, which are, to keep it simple, providers or builders of digital infrastructure that is shared by multiple providers of services. We are happy to share that this report found a great appeal in this industry. It was in fact downloaded hundreds of times and viewed well over 1,000 times, which convinced us that we should continue reporting this index and provide updates on this market. Today, we are excited to announce that the second edition of this report is now available. Now, in order to launch this second edition, no one is better qualified than its authors. As such, we are privileged to have them with us today, so I would like to introduce. We'll be joined by an additional panelist, Mirko Masi, a telecom infrastructure executive and a veteran of this industry. Mirko, by the way, has also contributed to this new edition by drafting sections that we have labeled as market insights. You will see them throughout the report. All three of them will be available to take your questions at the end of the session. Also, at the end, we will put up a QR code and a link to access a copy of this report. Now, as an introduction to this webinar, and I'm sure as most of you know, Nokia has a complete portfolio of products and solutions addressing all domains relevant to mobile, fixed, and cloud communication networks, addressing communication service providers, hyperscalers, enterprises, and the public sector. In Nokia, we have been looking closely into the development of global digital infrastructure. The Global Neutral Host Index report provides us with important information on the evolution of infrastructure asset categories such as fiber, towers, data centers, and multi-asset network builds, and the split of the passive, active, and software parts of this market. It provides us with insights into what is driving these business models, industry trends related to shared infrastructure, and outlook of this market for the next 5 years. And in response to your demand, we have introduced focus sections into this report that delve deeper into some specific topics. For this edition, we have two focus sections, one on the indoor neutral host market, and another one on a specific success story of a neutral host model, which this time is that of OnNet Fibra in Chile. Now, this last one will not be covered in this webinar because of time constraints, but you can read all about it in the report. Now, I will let Stéphane and Philippe take you through the key findings of this report. Then, as I said, Mirko will join us for a panel discussion, and then we will have the Q&A session. Please post your questions during the presentation, and we will attempt to answer as many of them as we can. And again, look for the QR code and link that would allow you to download the report. I hope that this report and this webinar will be useful to all of you. Please give us your feedback. It will be very much appreciated. Stéphane and Philippe.
Thank you very much, Michel, and welcome to the Global Neutral Host Index. Ladies and gentlemen, the first thing we want to do is to tell you what we are talking about. So are we showing the right slide, which is about neutral host definition and types? Because that's not what I see on my screen. Yeah, we are. Thank you. So basically, it's all about real estate. And you know, it's real estate business. Yeah, this is the way it started, and we are looking at these categories that you see on the screen. Tower codes. This is actually how it started back in the 80s already. Primary business is to lease cell towers to mobile operators. Think about SBA Communications. It's a big one in the Americas. Think about Vantage Tower in Europe, IHS Tower in the Middle East, Africa, Indus Tower in Asia. So these guys are just, you know, renting, offering cell sites. But we'll discuss that later, they are actually exploring new ideas and new potential business opportunities. Then we have the fiber core. They popped up pretty much at the beginning of the century. They come from the excess fiber capacity that was deployed during the telecom rush, if you remember. So they provide fiber connectivity to domestic and global business customers, including residential customers. It can be both passive and active type of services. So if you want some name examples, think about Fibrasil in Brazil, FiberPass in Spain. We have Lumen here in the US, Arnet in Asia, and Philippe Michel actually talked about Onet Fibra in Chile. Then we have a more recent type of category here, which is the data center colocation cos. They provide vendor-neutral multi-tenant data center colocation, but of course, interconnection and data exchanges, edge platform services to global enterprise CSPs, digital media and content providers. If you want some examples, think about actually a big one, NTT Data in Asia, OData in Latin America. We have Global Switch in the UK. We have Open Colo in the US. And then the other one, which is even more recent, is the folks who actually design, build, and also operate various types of neutral host infrastructure like fiber, cellular, Wi-Fi, data centers. These are called or named network builders. Think about Extenet in the US, for example, and a big one in the UK is Boldin Networks. And then we have sub-categories like infracos. Typically, they combine several assets. Think about Cellnex. Cellnex actually started in 2005 as Albertis Telecom, which was a digital terrestrial TV provider in Spain. We have same situations in many countries like TDF in France, for example. We have the netcos. So these are infracos that are pretty much communication service providers spin-off. In fact, Fibrasil that I mentioned in the FiberCo category comes from Bibo, which is Telefónica Brazil, and that is a spin-off. So now let's move to the next slide. So what we have here is we talk about the key driver. So what's going on, is the question, why are we getting into that situation where you have four major drivers? One is the CSP, communication service providers, that are separating from their core infra assets. That means, they want to, typically it's OPEX stuff. They want to lower the cost structure by having somebody else taking care of that asset and generate value from that asset. So depending on market conditions, you can see, joint ventures like, Vodafone and Altis. For example, they launched FiberCo in the UK, actually in Germany, and this was a FTTH network. So that's, we see that. You can also, see Orange with Totem in France. Then we have another driver, which is the environment, sustainability. And that means you want to get rid of duplication. Remember, I remember at the beginning of this century in the UK, in Scotland, in the middle of nowhere, you had 4 operators, just 1 cell tower, 4 RANs. This is ridiculous, right? Particularly when there is almost no traffic. So this is also called rationalization of assets. And also you have to think about the active equipment in urban areas. You may have some restrictions as well that you need to take into account. Next category from a driver perspective is the institutional investors. They love this neutral host business because it offers a combination of long-term stable returns, high cash flow visibility, and defensive growth in volatile market. So they love it. I mean, everyone, everyone I see somebody like this, they're like, oh, I love it. This is a cool, sexy business. And then last but not least, the regulators and policymakers, and it's pretty much related with the environmental issue of, but also speed up business access, broadband access to people, to enterprises, because you want to bring the high penetration. Broadband is key. If you don't have any broadband, you're pretty much lost in this world. So these are the major drivers. So then we are moving to the next slide. So on this slide, what you see is the numbers, and actually on this slide, so I'm not sure. I don't know what I did. Okay, so what you see is, I say, the numbers, and these numbers are big, and we'll see actually in the next slide or two that although these numbers are big, because it's repetitive with another slide, the global telecom service market, yes, on this slide, is showing that we are talking about a $1 trillion economy, and and that portion of neutral host is, although it's growing, it's small. But the good news is it's actually expanding faster than the global telecom business, because things are not doing that well in for CSPs. If you look at the revenue growth, some actually are posting, the lucky ones are posting 3 to 5% revenue year-over-year revenue. But if you look at the overall global revenue bucket, it's just 0.5% year-over-year. So the good news is that you have actually these neutral host companies that are making some inroad, and we'll talk about the growth in the next slide, which is more detailed, actually.
So you mean maybe the previous one?
No, I mean after. So in fact, over to you, Philippe, to talk about the role of AI here. But yeah, we have actually more details about growth rates in revenue and Capex.
Okay, thank you, Stéphane. So regarding AI, in this report, we call AI like a multiplier effect, but it's actually becoming the new, I would say, rocket fuel for neutral hosts. So what's changed in the past 12 months regarding AI? We've moved into an autonomous phase. We are now seeing AI system actually self-correct, reroute traffic, manage power without anyone touching a button. So here are two areas where it really matters for neutral hosts. First, energy and sustainability. That's really the big one. AI can help players to achieve up to 20% reduction in energy costs. So when you manage thousands of sites, it has a massive impact on the bottom line. The second one, where we see is AI inferencing and AI agents are going to be computed on device, at the edge, at the core of the network. So more fiber will be needed in the metro and the access areas. So neutral host players are the front runners in doing this networking plumbing. Just a couple of real-world examples that happened in the past 12 months. So American Tower has been aggressively building aggregation edge data centers in places like North Carolina, Raleigh. They've opened facilities specifically designed for AI model inference at the edge, which is a big shift from the AI model training. And Lumen and Zayo, for example, the two big fiber giants, they see a surge in demand for AI-led data center interconnectivity. So they are now selling the high speed, the low latency connectivity, which allows the AI model to talk to each other across continents. And finally, Cellnex are leveraging AI for resilience as a service, if we may say. by using predictive maintenance, they can identify potential equipment failures before they happen, ensuring the always-on connectivity that their tenants now demand. So this is a summary for AI. Over to you, Stéphane, for the next slides.
Yeah, thank you, Philippe. So yeah, this is exactly what I was referring to, because as we all know, the devil is always in the details. So you saw, these pies with, that little percent going to a higher percentage of the share of global revenue, global telecom revenue, and we'll see Capex as well. So this is what I'm talking about here. You see, what's interesting is, as I said at the beginning of this presentation, the oldest category is Tarako. So you see at the bottom, well, yeah, that's a pretty substantial business, $58 billion in revenue, growing at 1.8% 5-year CAGR to 64 billion. So we have more than 350 Tarakos in the world. So you get the situation, right? Yes. And so that's why, this is still significant, but not growing as fast as the other categories. Then fiber cores. On the fiber core scene, the issue is you have tons of them. So you may argue, yeah, you said 350 plus tower cores. We're talking about hundreds of fiber cores. And if you go to places like the UK, for example, we have been hearing about consolidation. And, it's more or less happening, but it's a big battlefield. So as a result, right now, the CAGR is just 0.8%. But look, there is not that much difference in terms of revenue between fiber cores and tower cores. Now, let's get into the most interesting part, because, look at data centers. So these guys are rocking. Well, of course they are, right? Because of AI, all the stuff that is going on with AI. So it's already a $60 billion market, growing to $85 billion in 2030 at a 7.2% 5-year CAGR. And then even stronger growth from the network builders, because this is the emerging categories. We're looking at the top 12 network builders in the world, and revenues, we estimated revenue at $1.2 billion in 2025, growing to $3 billion in 2030. So the bottom line is everybody is growing, and even the fiber cores at 0.8% CAGR, they are growing faster than the telco. And that's the big bottom line of this slide. And overall, if you add them up, we are talking about a $200 billion market in 2030, distributed along the 4 categories. So let's move to the next slide, which I think is about the Capex. Here we are, because we talked about revenue, but we have to look at Capex. And again, see global telecom Capex going down, although now actually we are always crunching the numbers. So we are getting numbers, and we are getting indication in 2031, because if you think about 5-year forecast, we're in 26, so you have to extend by 1 year. And we may see an uptick actually in global telecom Capex because of 6G, whatever that is, but there'll be some spending. But the bottom line here is that it's decreasing, at 1% per year, every year, because service providers are tightening up the belt because they are not able to monetize 5G, and they don't want to spend too much in a network, which gives a better incentive to neutral host companies, to step in and say, hey, look, I'm going to do it. Let's do it. So then on the other hand, you can see that from the neutral host perspective, the Capex is growing at a 2.2% CAGR, 5-year CAGR, and going up all the way up to pretty much, what do we have? $50 billion from $45 billion in 2025. And if you look at the share of the total pie, it was 14.7% in 2025, and that is growing to 17.3% in 2030. So this is, very all good news for the neutral host. So now on the next slide, what we have here is also the interesting part that we want to communicate. the breakdown between passive, active, and software. Because remember, at the beginning of the presentation, I said some tower cores, are doing, most are doing passive. Some are thinking, hey, maybe we can get into the RAN business, RAN as a service. But anyway, I'm sure you want to know more about what I mean by passive here. So passive, as you can see, makes the bulk of everything because it's all about adding fiber, tower for tower cores, but even actually fiber to the tower. Think about this. This is, a reality. Cabling, real estate. This is what passive is all about. So this is heavy stuff, right? But software and active, as you can see, present the greatest and fastest growth rates. And now, what do we mean by active equipment? Well, broadband aggregation equipment, IP routers, switches, and you need all that stuff in data centers, for example. Optical transport between data centers, but pluggable optics, in data centers, but optical transport for, FTTH. Now, on the cellular side, you need RAN infrastructure. Then we are still talking as humans. So guess what? You need voice infrastructure. So bottom line is the share of active Capex is expected to grow from 35%, estimation for 2025 to 37% by 2030. So then on the next slide, even more interesting to talk about. This is, this is an exercise of, okay, this is the global picture that we just talked about. Now let's look at each category and find out, the share of active versus passive. So I guess you're not surprised here to see that, for tower cores, the passive Capex part accounts for more than 87% of total. And typically it's broken down by new site and data center construction, site redevelopment and upgrades. But new site, 50%, existing site redevelopment and upgrades, 20% of Capex, site maintenance, 10%. But as I said, you have some tower companies that are, like, for example, Cellnex, Vantage Tower, they are exploring new opportunities in the active domain. Think about small cells. So we saw actually lots of small cells deployment, Capex from these guys, but small cells as a service and platform as a service. Now, if you look at fiber cores, same thing. You have 51% of global, of total Capex is coming from fiber. But they are also looking at, spending on enhancing network operating efficiencies. They are developing new services, and they are expanding, the fiber network assets, replacing old assets. So that's why passive is so big. And then the two other categories. So on the one hand, you have data center colocation costs. So yes, 45% of their Capex go to the active equipment because they need to enable customers to link with various networks and cloud providers within the data center and without, going out the data centers, and also to connect with other data centers. So passive is 51%. Because it pertains to buildings. You have to build the buildings first. So that means construction, acquire lands, and connection actually with the energy grid. Let's not forget that. This is a major issue. And finally, network builders. So active Capex portions makes up 60% of total, followed by passive, 30%, and software, 10%, because the bulk of their projects rely on existing infrastructure, such as DAS, distributed antenna systems in stadiums and street furnitures as well, putting small cells on lampposts, in streets or bus stops, like in London, for example. So I'm done with that slide. And I think, yes, we have this one. Over to you, Philippe, to talk about indoor.
Yes, indoor. It was a big. It's a big zoom of the new edition, of the second edition. So what's it's all about? So well, what we know is that 80% of mobile usage happens indoors. Okay, but we also know that modern energy efficient glass acts like a shield against outside signals. So what's changed in the past 12 months for neutral hosts? So the shift in 25 and 26 is the move from traditional hardware to Open RAN and virtualized architectures. First, it simplifies deployment for neutral hosts. They can now host multiple tenants on a single digital connection. Then it brings also footprint reduction. We are seeing cases where equipment that used to take up to 300 square feet is being shrunk now to 2 small rack units. That's a 50% reduction in power and space lease requirements. Here are a couple of examples from the real life. In July 2025, Boldin, I think Stéphane, you alluded to it. Let me give a bit of more flavor. Boldin Network deployed the first full Open RAN managed service at the Stadium of Light in the UK, in Sunderland. It allows fans to have high-speed 5G while reducing the stadium's power spending by 60%, 60. Another example is SBA Communications, the huge US neutral host, a great example of a towerco that are moving indoors in the US. Their recent focus on passive optical LAN and edge data center allows them to repurpose the base of their sites to host AI systems. So to really understand where it's heading, the charts explain the shift from a nice to have to a must have utility model. The first chart on the left shows global indoor wireless market set to pass 4 billion mark, growing at a healthy 11% CAGR. But look at the purple and the pink sections. Something here is happening, and Stéphane mentioned already, small cells are exploding. Meanwhile, traditional DAS is flattening or being replaced by Open vRAN. And this is because it's cheaper to deploy and it's cheaper to upgrade as we move from 5G to 5G Advanced and then to 6G. For a neutral host, it means also that you can offer capacity on demand. You don't have to overbuild on day one. You can start small and scale as the building's occupancy grows. On the right-hand side, the second chart shows multi-dwelling units, MDUs, construction in the US. It means that the demand for high-density living remains massive. Tenants like Gen Z or remote workers rank high-speed indoor connectivity higher than almost any other amenity in their building. So this is where the neutral host model wins, because instead of, let's say, 5 different fiber providers drilling holes in a new building, only one neutral host provides a digital plumbing that every tenant can choose from. So basically, it's turning connectivity into a standard utility, just like water or power. And this is an important point that I'm sure we will talk about in the next conversation. So this now concludes our presentation. And over to you, Michel, for the panel session.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much, Stéphane and Philippe, for this great presentation and for relaying to us the excellent conclusions of this report. There's really a lot to absorb here. I just want everyone to note that these were just excerpts from this report. At the end of the webinar, we'll provide the link to download the full report, and you'll see that there's a lot more there to absorb. So I would now like to welcome Mirko Masi to join us for the panel conversation. Hello, Mirko. It's good to see you. So let's get started. In fact, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask the first question to you.
Okay.
So as I said in my introduction, you are a veteran of this industry and an expert in infrastructure sharing. What a difference a year can make. From what we heard now, a lot has happened since our last webinar and the last report. More consolidation in the industry, continued investment in infrastructure, and of course, AI, which has entered the space just like everything else in the industry. But starting with the consolidation and the M&A, how do you qualify this past year, and what impact have you seen it have on the telecom landscape? Is it actually gaining momentum?
Okay, last year I would say it has been characterized by a new move in the telecom market related to consolidation of operators, even if reality is that Not many of them happened because they are still under conversation, sometimes due to regulation forces or need to investigate and agree better the details. But in general, this has been moving, and at the same time, you have seen the importance and the central point of the digital infrastructure in the importance of the business life and also on the social life because of the importance and centrality of the communication. Based on that, still there is an interest of having infrastructure M&A activity, even if in last year I would say that M&A activity has been reduced, especially in Europe. Still having an interest, the fund and the private equity on this type of market, since it's a very interesting market from the perspective of entry barrier, link prices linked to the CPI and so on. The reality is that the M&A has been reduced, but still there is a lot of interest on this infrastructure. Related to the activity, I would say that the main activity in terms of M&A and consolidation has been on fiber and data center more than in the operation of related towers. And I would say that what is not happened has been, for example, what has been announced since some time, for example, consolidation between TowerCo. In many countries, you have TowerCo, several TowerCo, and also the integration of mobile operator, especially at the cross-border. This is, I would say, is the main characteristic of what has happened.
Very clear. Thank you very much. Philippe, Stéphane, anything to add, or we move to a different topic?
Very clear. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
great.
good.
All right, Philippe. Then you talked about AI, and I want to ask you to expand maybe a bit on this and tell us whether AI, in your opinion, will result in a gradual evolution and strengthening of the infrastructure sharing model, or a revolution leading to some radically new business models. What do you think?
Yeah, evolution or revolution, it's a big topic. So for neutral hosts that are managing assets for multiple tenants, AI is the key to solving the complexity of those shared systems. So we see playing three critical roles. I've already mentioned the first two, energy optimization and predictive maintenance. Let me add a third role, which is dynamic resource allocation. Like, for example, in a multi-tenant environment, AI can ensure that the capacity is shifted in real time where it is needed the most, whether it is an indoor DAS system during a stadium event or fiber backhaul during peak hours. Again, I'd like to share, before answering your question, some real-life examples. As one of the world's largest data center colocation provider, Digital Realty implemented AI software to manage cooling across its London estate. So it resulted in 20% reduction in cooling energy consumption during the first year of the ongoing project. Another example we mentioned in the report, you will see Chile on-net Fibra case study. They are currently evaluating AI-driven digital tools to verify fiber connections in real time. It means when a technician is about to leave a site, he does that only after successful validation of a shared port. Right. So to answer your question, for me, it's a gradual evolution with revolutionary outcomes. The infrastructure itself, of course, towers, fiber, it won't change overnight. But the revolution comes from how we monetize. For example, Vantage Towers and American Tower are exploring edge as a service, where they just don't lease space, but they provide localized AI compute power right at the tower base. And this transforms a passive real estate company into an active technology partner. So now, of course, the uncertainty lies on how quickly CSPs will trust this third party, but the efficiency gains, in my opinion, make it an inevitable shift.
Right. Okay. Again, very clear answer. Thank you. Mirko, you wanted to add?
Maybe just to add that this AI revolution, as you mentioned, is really an opportunity also for these neutral hosts, providing probably an end-to-end solution for who is going to have this deployment and the usage of AI. But what has been shown in the last year, but also in the past, is a blocker, that is the availability of power. This is really because the AI is demanding very much power. There is a prospect of demand of several gigawatt in different regions, and this is a point that we should consider as a potential blocker for this big opportunity for any type of operators.
Right. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Stéphane, let me go to you and ask you, how much do you think, or do you see this as, the neutral host model becoming a global trend? Have some regions adopted this model more rapidly than others? And in fact, there's a question in the chat asking if there's any data from North America. So can you talk a little bit about this regional aspect?
Yeah, so each region has its own specifics. As I mentioned, it really started with towers back, in the 80s, and actually here in the US. So that's why, this market is super mature. But think also about distributed antenna system. The largest consumers of DAS are actually the US, and on the other hand, China. As Philippe said, they're not going to disappear overnight. You have to upgrade them, and you have to upgrade them with Open vRAN, partly in the West, starting with the US, but not in China. They don't like that. So this is one aspect of, coming from the history of how we deal with the existing assets and we evolve the existing assets. Then if you look at, on the fiber side, you have, you have very dynamic markets like Brazil, for example, Spain, and I mentioned the UK. But then you have other markets that are waking up. I'm thinking the Philippines, and why I'm picking on the Philippines, it's because this is a small country, but a very complicated country is made of a bunch of islands. And you have 20 tower cores in the Philippines. You're like, what? It doesn't make any sense, So this is a very good example of, a situation where you think there might be some consolidation. So they are trying to put fiber to the tower. Think about it. Again, islands, how do you, lay a fiber to connect the islands? So, again, I provided examples of very particular situation that you can find everywhere in the world. So you have, places, where it started, like the US, where it has been adopted, very quickly, and then less developed places in the world where, it's picking up. But then we'll, and in fact, yes, there was a question in data for North America. So we have data actually, for each region that we are not showing in this report. So that may actually be part of the next update, doing a deep dive by region and potentially by country, because we have done projects on specific countries, including small Pacific islands like Palau. Palau, at the moment, as we speak, is actually deploying Open vRAN, not in a neutral host fashion, but it's an interesting development because this is a very small island.
Right. Right. Anything to add, Mirko or Stéphane?
Yeah, maybe something relatively obvious, but I'm thinking about India and the gigantic rollout that they are doing, and the very fast-paced rollout they are doing in 5G rollout. They are leading in tower core growth, but the model isn't just an alternative. In many emerging markets, not just India, you mentioned Philippines, Africa, etc. It's probably the only viable way to deploy fiber and 5G profitably. So just a point to note that this is again a kind of global trend on emerging markets that will replicate from market to market.
Okay, thank you. So let me move on to a different topic, maybe going to you, Mirko. And this is maybe a vast domain, but if you can talk a little bit about the role of regulation in this domain, how does it take shape across the regions, and what movements is it creating related to infrastructure sharing? We will develop this hopefully in another edition of this report, but if you can just give us some insights there.
Yeah, what we have seen is that depending on the region, there are different moves and different roles of the regulators. Especially in Europe, we have seen a tentative of regulator to enter and promoting the sharing and helping this model that we are speaking about. But the reality is that it takes some time. Recently, we have seen, for example, a move of the regulator looking at the resilience of the network by forcing the operator to have better capability to in front of blackout and so on. This is an example of moving the capital to some specific investment that probably neutral loss can help in developing by sharing. This is a typical example of that doesn't make any sense at each operator in investing, while you can have a neutral loss doing it for them, probably sharing in better and more efficient way. What we have seen is also some specific example of sharing promoted by a regulator, like we have seen in New Zealand, where there is an operator that is sharing the frequency of the different mobile operator, providing rural coverage in several areas. And this is happening even with different degree of implementation in several countries. So what we expect and we see is the entrance of the regulator in this domain, helping the developer networks. Also remembering that, for example, all tower cos and all the infraco have been investing a lot of money so far in all this infrastructure, and the idea is to promote also this sharing to make them sustainable, the telecom infrastructure domain.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. And as I said, we will be covering this very important aspect of the neutral host business in the next edition. Philippe, maybe a question to you here. In your presentation, you show a significant increase, in fact, in revenue and in Capex, really in all categories of the neutral hosts. I was just wondering if you could comment on, does this mean that in the next few years we will see some of the traditional resistance to this model, to the infrastructure sharing model, receding? I mean, when will this model become business as usual?
Yeah, let's look at the crystal ball. Thank you, Michel. Very easy question. No, first, of course, what Stéphane did in the research, the figures, they speak for themselves in terms of forecast. The neutral host revenue is expected to grow at 3.7% CAGR annually until 2030, compared to just 0.5% for traditional telecom services. So, and also, as Stéphane showed, Capex as well is shifting, with the neutral host share of the global telecom spend rising from 15% to 17.3%. So first, this is the proof that we are seeing. The resistance is receding because economic reality has outpaced, like the legacy pride that maybe some CSPs had. The model will become business as usual when we stop talking about sharing and we start talking about, like the word utility that I already mentioned. We are already there for the data center and for the tower space. Definitely, nobody argues that. So fiber and 5G small cells are the next frontiers, in my opinion.
Okay.
So to prove that it's becoming business as usual, we can look at a couple of strategic examples, strategic pivots that major players play. So the emergence of pure play netco, for example, TDC Net in Denmark, they successfully operated as an independent infrastructure company, providing Denmark's fastest fiber and 5G networks to all service providers equally. And again, this is this utility model that has proven that a single but high quality share network is more profitable than 3 networks that are underutilized or under optimized. Another example is in Brazil, Vital. They moved from local fiber to become a massive regional neutral host. They acquired Telecom, and more importantly, they are now expanding to a new subsea cable and to integrate a new data center in Porto Alegre. So this shows that neutral hosts are now managing the entire global data path and not just like being a tower core.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Philippe. Let me take a couple of questions that came from the audience. First, there was a question specific on fiber. Is the current neutral hosting market truly keeping up with the full potential of fiber and GPON technology? Who would like to take this?
Yeah, I mean, yes, in fact, look at on-net fiber as a case study in the report. But in the previous report, every single fiber core we interviewed, was thinking about keeping up with, the next generation of PON available. And we hear that everywhere in the world, of what's new. I mean, asking Nokia, what do you have, in the pipeline? So yes, of course, yeah, it's the name of the game is keep up as opposed to catch up, because in very dynamic markets like again Spain, Brazil, now Chile, and we see, I talked about the Philippines, for example, but you have other pockets in Asia. Yeah, you'd better be able to deploy, adopt, new technologies, and particularly all the new features, offered by, GPON. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, and another question is that you mentioned that you're tracking the 12 largest network builders to extrapolate the segment's market size. Can you give an idea on who these 12 players are?
Well, in some, because I mean, most are private companies. So we talk to them under NDA. So, and that's why we don't list them, because some doesn't want to show up. They, as it's an exchange. They tell us how they, what they are doing and how they are doing. But in exchange, we tell them this is the big picture. So of course, you have Boldin, Extenet, Freshwave is on the one, and then a bunch of others spread out in different parts of the world.
Okay. Thank you. Another one, maybe Mirko, you could address this one. It seems that infrastructure sharing is more mature in the fixed domain than in the mobile domain. Did I understand this correctly? That's a question directly from the audience.
I wouldn't say that. I would say that there is probably level of penetration of the sharing that is different by region, but I wouldn't differentiate between the fixed or mobile. Of course, traditionally, probably fixed activity has been started before than in the case of mobile, but I wouldn't take this conclusion.
Okay, all right. Any other insights from you, Stéphane or Philippe, on this question?
Yeah, in fact, I agree with Mirko. However, I would say that, and I said it at the beginning of this webinar, that it started with towers because there was no fiber, at the beginning. So, in the 80s already, it started with towers. You had people, smart people thinking, look, I have that asset, sitting there. Maybe I can do a better job in monetizing that asset, So this is how the story started.
Okay.
Maybe just to add, for the European tower co, the American are the reference because there is where the sharing is really at the limit.
That's right.
Europe,
Thanks,
we have
Mirko.
to do still a lot of work to be there. Yeah.
Okay.
And also what we've seen in this webinar. Sorry, Michel,
No, please, yes.
To add a bit more complexity, what's amazing in this second edition already is to see the lines are blurring, right? We gave so many examples, Mirko, Stéphane, and I, whether pure tower co, pure mobile guys are becoming mobile. I gave the example of the subsea cable and the data center collocation. AI is accelerating this blurring of how neutral infrastructure is being used. So maybe we will. I think we were right in mentioning that neutral host is like this complete set of companies and maybe in the near future it will not really matter whether it is mobile or fixed, etc. It's really more infrastructure, neutral infrastructure companies.
Right. Good point. Very well. Another question that came from the audience as well is, do you have a view on the power demand per neutral host domain and per continent? Now, of course, maybe we cannot talk about the entire matrix here, but can one of you comment on this power demand and maybe the efficiencies that the neutral host model introduces in terms of power consumption?
So at Téral Research, we do not have the demand, but we track the consumption in our telecom energy and sustainability research. So we know what's going on. The carbon footprint is going up. Coming from data centers, I don't think there is a big surprise there. However, if you look at the mobile operators, so they are doing a good job of, maintaining. They did great progress, but now they are kind of stuck with their carbon footprint because they are getting more efficiencies actually from products like Mentari Sun from Nokia, and the deep sleep mode on their RAN. But it's in big companies like, and I'm thinking about the big incumbent Deutsche Telekom, Orange, and by the way, they are the greenest on the planet. Let's say that. However, these are big companies, so you have fiber assets. On the one hand, they are getting into data centers, and boom, and on the other hand, with RAN, they keep decreasing the power consumption. So the demand, on the demand side, we don't know. I mean, what they are keeping an eye on is how to decrease the consumption.
Okay.
Yeah, but there is just to complement, it is two driver. One is the efficiency optimization of the equipment that is put on air, that is getting better performance, but at the same time there are more frequency and more element to put on it. So at the end, this equilibrium increases the demand. Of course, neutral host, we have seen that is implementing mechanism to reduce this consumption, but this also can be done by operators. From the data center point of view, as is written in the report, there is a big demand, especially from North America, Middle East, but also Europe. So that part still probably now not in the end of neutral loss, but it will probably come when the model will evolve.
Okay. All right. Another question came asking if there are examples of regional or city infrastructure sharing in the sense where you have one operator's RAN used in one region and another operator's RAN in another region, and the sharing is done this way.
Maybe I can take it. There are a lot of examples like this, especially one very known are in Europe, for example. I imagine the case of Vodafone and Orange, or the case of SFR and Bouygues in France. So in this case, operators are managing the RAN in one region where they host the other operator, vice versa. This is a model that is already proved since several years. The next step probably will be a RANCO, so an entity that will provide service to all the operator in the same areas or in the whole countries.
Okay, all right. Great. This puts us here to the end. There are other questions, of course, but maybe it's a good time to stop here. I would like to put up the, if possible, on the screen the slide showing the QR code. Thank you all very, very much for attending this webinar. I'd like to thank very much our speakers, Stéphane Téral, Philippe Poggianti, and Mirko Masi, for this very nice presentation and panel discussion. Again, please send us your feedback. You can see the email on the screen. We would very much look for your inputs, and we will act accordingly to hopefully improve our next editions of the report. I hope all of this is useful to you, and thank you again, and have a very nice end of the day and end of the week.